If you've been watching the news lately, you've probably heard and seen many headlines that people are worried about a contagion effect in cryptocurrency. But what even is a contagion effect? What makes it so scary? And what are some of the ways that it could hopefully be prevented? That's the subject of today's video. Hey everyone, and welcome back. This is the Part-Time Economist, and in today's video we're going to be talking about an economic phenomenon known as a contagion effect, which is the spread of an economic crisis from one market or region to another. Now, as we start this video, obviously I'm talking about economics, so I want to give my standard disclaimer. This is not financial advice. It is not telling you about a good cryptocurrency. It's not telling you about a bad cryptocurrency. Rather, we're using current events to illustrate a broader economic theory, a concept. It does have some applications to crypto, of course, but it's more of a broad concept. So with that being said, you've probably heard contagious, right? So you know the idea of something spreading, but maybe the economic concept is a little bit more difficult to understand because you're probably thinking, isn't a bad economy a bad economy? Like, aren't all downturns bad? And to illustrate the severity of a contagion versus a normal economic downturn, I want us to think about sickness. And we'll get into cryptocurrency, we'll get into all of that later on, but just stick with me for this first example. So let's suppose on the right, we have got Happy Healthy Harry. And Happy Healthy Harry is feeling good. He's just going about his day, loving life. Now, his friend Saul has the sniffles. And Saul is over there sneezing, blowing his nose. He's not having a good time. And Happy Healthy Harry feels very bad for his friend. But he says, hey, at least it's not me. I'm still going to go to the gym. I'm still going to work out. I'm still going to do all these things. That's like a normal economy, right? Let's suppose you've got your hometown and there's this restaurant that you always used to go to, and one day it closes. It's very sad that they closed. You might be sad, the owners are probably sad, but at the end of the day, your business is relatively unaffected by it. That's like a normal economic downturn. But for a contagion effect, think of instead if Saul with the sniffles, he keeps blowing his nose, and now Happy Healthy Harry gets sick also, and he is no longer happy. He is also no longer healthy because he is sick too. And on first glance, we might say, this is really unfortunate. Now we've got two people that are sick. But not only do we have two people that are sick themselves, we've got twice as much probability of spreading the infection to other people. And if we think about our example of this small town business that kind of closes, right? Let's suppose instead of just that business closing, well, guess what? The place where they got their food to cook for people, that was from a local farmer. And now that local farmer has nowhere to sell their fruits and veggies. Well, if they can't sell their fruits and veggies, they also cannot pay the bank for their mortgage. So now that bank starts to fail. Well, what happens when the bank starts to fail? Well, now people that need loans for college can't go to college. What happens when people can't go to college? Now the college fails, right? And again, this is kind of an exaggerated scenario, but it's trying to show you the point that with the contagion effect, it can spread into areas that we wouldn't really think of being associated with each other, and that's what makes it so scary and unpredictable. So just to give some historical examples here, probably one of the most well-known is the Great Depression, which of course had a variety of causes. People still debate and write about it, everything like that. So again, this is a super oversimplified version here, but basically we've got the Great Depression and the US stock market, it starts to decline. Businesses start to crash. Well, what happens when your businesses crash? They don't need to buy imports, right? They don't need to buy lumber or iron or anything like that. So these countries that supply that to the US, now they start to struggle. Well, my business crashed. I don't have money. I'm going to pull it out of the bank. Well, guess what? The banks don't have enough money, so now they start to fail. Well, what do people think when the banks start failing? They pull money wherever they can, maybe foreign banks. Now foreign banks are failing. And the US says, hey, this is really bad. We've got to protect the domestic economy. So we're going to put up tariffs so that no one else can sell their products here. You've got to buy American and support the economy. First, it sounds good. But then other countries say, well, if we can't sell to you, you can't sell to us. And now American businesses can't export products as easily either. So again, kind of a snowball effect where one thing, a stock market decline, leads to bank runs, leads to tariffs, leads to all of these different things, right? And for a more recent example, we can look at 2008. So this graph actually is from Wikipedia. I know, don't cite your Wikipedia sources, but it does a fantastic job showing how we moved through 2008. So we've got too many houses, right? We've got excess inventory. What does that do? It causes prices to fall. And again, normally we would say, hey, that's not a problem. This makes houses more affordable, right? That would be an isolated event. But a lot of these houses were built on adjustable rate mortgages. They were built on the assumption that housing prices would go up. And when they stopped going up, now we've got loans that aren't good. Well, who makes the loans? Banks make the loans. Now these banks, they've got bad assets on their balance sheets. Well, banks start to have issues. Guess what banks are a part of? The stock market. So as these banks fail, the stock market goes down. Well, guess what? People that retire, what do you think the vast majority of Americans have their savings in for their retirement accounts? 401ks, IRAs, aka the stock market, right? So it's this kind of cycle again where one thing, too much housing prices declining, ends up with this massive worldwide recession, right? So the point that I'm trying to make is that the thing that makes it so scary is we don't know how far it will spread. Now, finally, getting to cryptocurrency. And again, because remember, this is a broad economic concept here. You've probably heard these headlines of a cryptocurrency contagion. What would an example of that be? If you think back a couple months ago to Terra Luna, right? This was a huge, massive cryptocurrency project that basically had a coin that was pegged at the value of $1, and then they had a different coin that was kind of like their main coin. And they had a bunch of lending and saving protocols that you could do. And again, I'm not getting into what happened or why or who was at fault. Again, not my scope outside of the video. But for whatever reason, things started to happen. The price of their cryptocurrency started to go down, right? That's kind of the isolated event, right? Cryptocurrencies crash all the time. So what made this different? Well, in order to kind of keep the price of their cryptocurrency, they had massive reserves of other cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. And the idea was that as the price of this goes down, well, what will we do? We'll sell Bitcoin and we'll buy this up to kind of push the price back up. Now, the issue becomes if I'm selling billions and billions of dollars of Bitcoin, that might raise the price of this, but what does it do to the price of Bitcoin? Well, massive sell pressure is going to push the price down. As the price starts falling, people say, oh my goodness, Bitcoin it's entering into a bear market. I should sell now. I should get out. You have people with like stop orders on exchanges. Those get triggered. So the price continues to go down. And again, price of Bitcoin goes down all the time, right? We see it kind of spreading from Terra to Bitcoin, but again, it's still within crypto. But then what we see also is we see these other businesses starting to be affected. So if you watched my most recent video about Celsius, you will know that they are a platform that you give them your cryptocurrency, they lend out that cryptocurrency and pass along some of that interest to you. Well, just a couple days ago, they came out with a press release that said, due to extreme market conditions, today we are announcing that Celsius is pausing all withdrawals, swap, and transfers between accounts. Notice what they said. They didn't just say we as a company are struggling. They said due to extreme market conditions. So, and again, I'm not doing an analysis here of Celsius, but according to their own words, the market was what prompted this, right? Well, why was the market bad? Well, Bitcoin was down. Why was Bitcoin down, right? So you can kind of go through these loops of one thing leads to another, and again, it spreads from one thing to another. So that being said, again, because this is a theory video, what's the big picture solution here? Well, in general, we look at two separate things with contagion. Number one is kind of this nip it in the bud mentality, right? Let's prevent a problem before it starts. And then number two, if we have a problem, let's kind of seal it off. Let's isolate that problem so it just stays over there in its own little box. And if we look back at several of the past, I'm speaking from a US perspective here, if we look back at several of these historical economic downturns, we get some kind of legislation, right? So with the Great Depression, we get the New Deal, we get all these regulations, we get Glass-Steagall Act, right? which says, hey, if you're an investment bank, you have to be separate from these commercial banks, right? So you've got to be, if you're taking average people's money and you're just, helping someone save for their house or to go to college, you can't also be investing in these crazy hedge funds and stuff like that, right? Again, oversimplification. 2008, we get Dodd-Frank, right? We're going to strengthen the financial regulations. We're going to do these things. We're going to have more oversight. We're going to have protection bureaus. Now we're going to have all these things. And again, not saying it's good or bad, just saying we generally have regulation that, at least in theory, is designed to prevent a economic event in the first place and then to limit it in scope. So you see in cryptocurrency, we don't really have that to the same degree. Cryptocurrency kind of being a little bit, well, substantially less regulated than other types of assets. But you still, even now, are starting to see people that were very kind of like anti-regulation kind of coming around and saying, hey, this regulation thing might help. Michael Saylor, many of you may know, is really big into Bitcoin. In a most recent interview, he was talking about, hey, we need kind of like these spammy projects. Bitcoin is getting caught in the crossfire. So he's saying, all of these bad scammy projects are causing good projects to go down. So he's like, hey, we need to find a way of getting them out of the space. So what will the future hold? What will we learn from this? I think the number one thing is to realize that cryptocurrency, like everything else, is not immune from basic economics, right? Just because it's a new asset class, just because it is less regulated, doesn't mean that some of these economic things that happen in the broader markets can't happen to cryptocurrency as well. Number two, it reminds us to always do our own research, make sure that we are, of course, fully investigating projects that we do or do not choose to invest in. And then thirdly, it shows that as people experience losses, right, they're going to want to prevent that. So these people that were kind of anti-regulation, they're going to come back and say, well, hey, maybe we could do with a few rules around here. So again, just to kind of wrap everything up here in summary, a contagion refers to the spread of a financial crisis from its original source to other areas. Typically, again, this is stocks, this is bonds, this is government debt, this is currency crisis. But as cryptocurrency becomes more widespread, it's not a surprise that we see the same thing applying here. So just to close out the video, I'd like to thank you for watching. I hope you appreciated it. As always, nothing is financial advice, and I will see you in the next video.